We ready to start? Thank you to everybody that showed up before lunch. Appreciate you doing that. I know it's a bit of a sacrifice, but there'll be more than enough food. You just get to be online a little bit longer and meet some other people that are attending. So my name is Karen Fetter. It's really interesting. When I scheduled, I'm always the moderator. I like doing that. And I invited Todd and Tom to be on this panel, and I was with Blanco at the time. But as we know in our industry, the constant has changed. So I've retired from Blanco, and gratefully Todd invited me to join Circular Integrity. So that's why there's two of us from the same company on here. So my background is 14 years with Blanco, and now grateful member of the Circular Integrity team. I'm going to let Todd and Tom introduce themselves.
There we go. Thank you, Karen, and welcome to the team, by the way. So Todd Zegers, I'm the founder and CEO of Circular Integrity. I've been in the ITAD space for about 21 years now. I started out in the IT sector at Insight selling computers, hardware, and software, and realized I wanted to go do something on my own, and started an ITAD company in 2003 called Green Asset Disposal, which we built that and sold to a company called Cloud Blue. If you've been in the business for all, you probably remember Cloud Blue. Sold that business to them in 2009. We then built Cloud Blue, sold it to Ingram Micro in 2013, and I left Ingram Micro after building that global business for about 10 years. I left there a little over a year and a half ago or so. So just a quick background on me.
Great. Thanks, Todd. I'm Tom Delich with Green Eye Partners. I've been grew up in this industry with my family throughout this time. Been in this position for the last 8 years with Green Eye. My day-to-day is working with management system implementations and conducting internal audits as well as certification body support. So when Karen invited me to talk on this panel, she challenged us to think about what value we bring to the industry and then what some questions that you guys might not think about. So we're hoping we can give you a good insight today.
Thank you very much. So the topic is the OEM and service provider perspective, looking at ITAD through a different lens. Am I speaking too loud? God, nobody has ever said that to me in my whole life. I don't even need this thing, but I just wanted to make sure it wasn't blaring. So the most important thing, because I've done a bunch of these, I moderated a lot of these. I like it to be interactive, because you all have a lot of knowledge and you may have questions for us, you may have questions for each other, so I definitely will encourage questions and even commenting on things that we're discussing. So with that in mind, my opening question is going to be for you all. How many of you are currently working with OEMs or are working with consultants? Great. There's a fair amount, so that's great. That means you have stuff to add to the session as well. So I'll encourage you to do that. So for Todd and Tom, I'm going to ask, what are the major areas that an ITAD needs to consider when they're looking at moving into or expanding their services, whether within what they're doing now or moving into the OEM arena?
I'll take that one first. Well, I think the lesson I've learned, first of all, is you need patience. You need to be ready to work with a potential partner or a customer that isn't typically as quick as you may see, whether you're going after a school system or a hospital or something like that. When you get into the world of an OEM, just because of the nature of their business and size, right, whether they're a $20 billion or a $100 billion OEM, they got to be that way for a certain reason. So they've got different procedures and processes built in place that can be challenging to work with, so you have to be patient, right? Most of them are obviously built to produce products and sell those products in the market. So as you start introducing a services concept, much like I did in my distribution days, it's a different process, right? And I think it's much more complex than they give it credit for. So the first thing you need to go in there with quite a bit of patience. But I think you need to understand, as far as most OEMs obviously are fairly global because they're selling their products all over the world. So you need to try to understand, if you're going to go try to partner with an OEM, what's your approach going to be? Do you want to try to just service them in the U.S.? Do you want to try to service them in other markets? And if it is in other markets, why would they want to use you versus going to someone else? If you're using partners, because I know most of us in the room in my history is you find international partners to support you, which can be a little bit challenging as far as pricing and margins and stuff like that. So I think being able to figure out your global footprint strategy, but also, what do you really want to get out of the relationship? Because it could be an OEM that makes multiple different types of products, and maybe you're really good at product A, and they want you to focus on 5 products, and you're going to try to stretch yourself and probably going down a path where you're going to try to go out and build something where someone else down the street already has that practice in place. So I think really focusing on where you want to try to play, what you're really good at, focus on what you're great at. And when I sit down in consulting sessions, which by the way, I never thought I would be a consultant. I was never a big fan of consultants, but here I am today. Just kind of backed into this one. But when I sit down with clients, the first thing I ask them is, what makes you special? And why do companies do business with you? Where do you win? And if what you're trying to do with an OEM is kind of outside of your comfort zone, or what made you great, I sound like Donald Trump now, but whatever made you great in your business, right? You want to try to really focus and leverage that. I think that's a really important piece. I think also, systems and reporting. Different OEMs are going to require different data points back from you. So understanding early on, what are the system development requirements you're going to have to build to develop to make sure you can support an OEM. OEMs are big. They're a big global machine. They want to go fast. They want to do a lot of high volume, high velocity processes with you. So you got to make sure that if your systems aren't ready for that next level, are you ready to make an investment next level? And then do you have a strategy or a systems company that can help you, take your system to the next level? Because trust me, that's where you can spend a lot of time and money and either fail or succeed in a great fashion. So I think those, and then just having the right talent, whether that is talent in-house that has familiarity with an OEM. I also think, in some of the work I've done with OEMs, I see ITAD providers that'll say, okay, listen, we're going to try to work with you, and then they put like a junior account manager on top of this account, expecting it to be just a transactional relationship. You really need to put some of your best people on an OEM relationship because of all those complexities I just mentioned and everything else. And I think where the role of a consultant works in an OEM world is a lot of these things you're going to go build to do business with the OEM. You may not need that person or that resource once you've implemented some of these programs, so you can bring in an expert, help them build out whatever you need, like Tom for compliance, for example, to make sure, let's say you're XYZ OEM, you're trying to work with them, and they say, here's all of our compliance requirements, and you're like, okay, I do R2, but I don't understand these other things. Who can I get to help me? So, but that's not something where you need to hire Tom as a full-time employee. It's more project-based work. So I think that's a powerful way to play in that. So.
Definitely. And then, on the compliance side, we see a bunch of different requirements, whether that is certification or specific industry requirements. You'll see on your onboarding summary forms or onboarding questionnaires, a bunch of different requirements that the OEMs will need to see from you and demonstrate. I heard earlier John use the word radical transparency, and as Todd was saying there, transparency is a huge part of that, being able to provide reporting through it throughout the entire process and communication with that. The other thing is there is some specific requirements that they may have that you might not understand. That's what we're here to help you with through. We put together legal and other requirements summary list to make sure you're just initially meeting the laws, and then additionally their requirements as well.
So this one's for you, Tom. Where does certification fit in when you're going to work with either an OEM, a managed service provider? Are there different types do they have more stringent things than somebody working in small to medium businesses as an ITAD?
Yeah, that's a great question. OEMs will have some specific requirements regarding certifications. Just knowing the certification environment and knowing the different types, it's different depending on who you're dealing with. The different ISO requirements, obviously, now we're seeing even more within some ESG reporting things, as well as just basic health and safety, environmental best practices are some of the requirements we're seeing a lot of the times. You want to rephrase that question real quick, Karen?
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Where does certification fit in when you're looking at OEMs,
dropping.
managed service providers, et cetera?
Yeah, definitely. So this certification process is a great way for verification and some other way to show your conformance to the best practices within this industry. So we have some specific industry standards that a lot of people will look for, like your E-Stewards, R2, RIOs, NAID, ADISA, CTIA, all those that are important that some people will require, and then there's some additional requirements on top of that that validate what you're doing is important. So if you haven't looked into certification, great idea to be able to demonstrate that right away. Check that box off right away in your vendor questionnaire.
All right, Tom, I'm going to throw you a zinger.
For sure.
So a lot of ITADs support OEMs. They support resellers, value-added IT resellers, managed services companies, et cetera. Knowing that end users are asking more and more OEMs and resellers to be their kind of ITAD provider, right? Which obviously most of them don't have infrastructure. They're going to outsource that to partners. How does an OEM or a VAR or a managed services company who isn't physically doing the operations, are they able to get like R2 certified or something like that, saying, listen, we just disclose all of our downstream partners and who manage everything are R2. Do they get to check the box, or how does that work? Or have you even seen that before? I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Haven't necessarily seen OEM be certified, if that was the question there. But we have seen the requirements of, hey, we've adopted this standard as our best practices. We want people to follow this and be able to do that. We have see a lot of more OEM like take-back programs. So there's some being able to fund it through either the city or the companies initially that you can buy into and be able to have that transparency to report back to them. So, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So there's a lot of opportunity out there. Why do you think ITADs are not going out for more things, that they're staying in their comfort zone, whether it's a niche market, whether it's a certain vertical, why they're not going after managed servers, things like that, OEMs? Why are they not doing that, do you think?
My personal opinion is that it goes back to a little bit of what I was saying earlier, what makes you great, right? And if you're really great at selling ITAD services to education, you should always be doubling down and putting your money there. The challenge becomes is how broad and wide do you want to get, right? That's why it goes back to, you need to really think through, whether it's an OEM or a reseller, whoever it may be you're going to try to get business from, is you got to really think through the time and investments going to come into that. I think if you look in the more sophisticated space of an OEM or an IT reseller or a managed service provider, right? These guys are from the IT space, and they understand margins and values, and they also understand the fact that if they're going to start, having you provide these services for them, they're going to be shopping you around a lot more than maybe an end user would. So I think the margin profile, typically going through more of a channel model versus direct, is a little bit less for obvious reasons. But obviously, you get the more opportunities to come in. But it also goes back to just all the complexities that come with dealing with an OEM, right? You need to have a lot of people. It has to be part of your strategy. You have to be committed to it, and you have to be able to be prepared to walk away if it doesn't work out. So I think it's a big piece of it.
Yeah, what we're seeing when put in front of these requirements, what you need to meet to work with someone, you can see it as jumping through hoops, or you can see it as having best practices and being able to meet these requirements. There's a lot of things that you're doing right, even initially, if you're not certified, that we can probably document. We take the approach of what you have in place already is great. If we need to correct something, we will, to be able to demonstrate these requirements. But it's usually not too far off from what we're doing already, just best practices.
Yeah, and something else that just came to mind I think about is when you work with an OEM, again, OEMs mostly are global. They've got stuff everywhere, right? And if you think about, if you're an OEM and you want to build this partner network to manage whether it's returns or reverse logistics and repair services or ITAD services, there's no such thing as what I call McITAD, right? There isn't an ITAD player in every single state or country around the world, so it's always going to have to be delivered through some sort of partnerships. But what I would tell you is, knowing the bigger guys who have a much bigger global footprint, if you don't have a large global footprint, a lot of times you won't even be considered to work with an OEM, because if you're kind of a one-trick pony, maybe you're in Uruguay or some small market where there's not a lot of ITADs, and they're going to probably bring you on, right? Or someone will use you as a partner. But the last thing an OEM or VAR or anyone wants to do is try to manage 100 different vendors, right? Trying to control your quality and your reporting and issue escalation and root cause analysis and fixes and all those kind of things. It can turn into a big rat's nest very quickly.
Okay, so it's your turn. Do you have any questions? Do you have any comments on anything that we've discussed so far? And please, somebody raise their hand. Oh, there you go. I don't know who you are, but thank you. Hold on. I think somebody's bringing a. Is somebody bringing a microphone? 1 second. Can you repeat the question, because I didn't hear it?
I'm sorry, there's like fan back here, we can't hear you.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, I was just wondering if you could talk about what kind of services people are providing to OEMs, what's working, and what kind of success stories are out there.
Yeah, so from an ITAD perspective, the way I look at the OEM landscape as it pertains to ITAD, and the way I define ITAD as more of a true service of going, taking stuff out, packaging it, white glove, bringing it back, doing data erasure, separate the stuff out like that, versus like returns. There's only so many OEMs, in my opinion, where it makes sense for them to even offer an ITAD program, right? If you think about like Belkin cables, for example, right? Why would Belkin ever need to get into the ITAD business? Because they were just recycling cables, and they're not really going to refurbish it or whatever else. So where I've seen success from ITADs is taking the next level. If you watch what's happening in the OEM space right now with the biggest players out there, is they are now proactively trying to go get their second life material, refurbish it, and resell it back into the marketplace. So where I see where ITADs are starting to make investments is in those refurbishment capabilities. It's funny, in my prior career with Ingram, obviously Ingram buys from all the big OEMs, so I got to meet with a lot of OEMs, and I was pitching these concepts to the CEOs years ago. They're like, why would you not want to get a second bite of the apple? Look at what Microsoft did with the MAR program. Right? They were smart. People are pirating the software, so make an affordable product to support the secondary business. Someone's going to do it anyways. So my play to them was always, well, their rationale was always that we don't want to cannibalize the sale of new products. I said, listen, pal, if someone wants to buy a used product, look up on eBay any part number you want to find right now, and it's available. So why would you not want to go do that? So I think the sustainability initiatives around the carbon neutrality goals and everything else is going along with that. I also think that a lot of OEM sales are down right now, so they're trying to find other ways that they can try to find additional revenue streams. So back to your question is looking at what types of OEMs and products they are. I think you see ITADs that are starting to reshape their operations a little bit to fit those opportunities, right? And which isn't an easy process because they may want you to turn left when your operation turns right, and you got to build a special line for that, which is never an easy or cheap thing to do. So hopefully that answered your question.
Anybody else have a question? Also comments. It doesn't. I think they heard me like 2 doors down. Any other comments or questions about your experience? Yes, sir. Oh, God.
I'm a volunteer. Thank you, guys. Great presentation. Interested in your view on the OEM landscape, meaning some OEMs, in my opinion, and I think in your assessment, are making much further strides than others. Kind of, and you said, Belkin is the example, and that's a good one, right? But if you think of in the server space, in the data center space, in the notebook space, in your assessment, who's playing where? Who's making the strides forward? I think we know who some of those partners are because they're here, but who's also beginning to realize the importance of ensuring that there is an ITAD associated with their products and ensuring that there is the second life in the circular economy.
Yeah, I mean, so we all know who's already kind of doing it. Obviously, Dell's doing it, HP's doing it, and HP's doing the session tomorrow, which I think what they're doing is going to be game-changing and a little bit different than how others are going about doing it. But I also, Lenovo is right behind it. They've made announcements, and I think when all the OEMs start seeing what HP and Lenovo, and I know Cisco's starting to make more of a move into this space now too. I think when others start seeing that the tier 1 brands are moving into this space, I think you're going to see others follow suit fairly quickly behind it. The question will be is what is the repurposability or the life cycle extension of a device from that OEM that plays in the market, right? Because if you look at like a PC, for example, that can be sold on eBay to a consumer, it can be sold back to a business. But if you're talking about an Epson projector that hangs from the ceiling, how much secondary market value is those? Are there in those? We all know, like at least back in the day, the cost of a light bulb back in the day used to be more than the cost of a projector. So I think it's going to be very OEM dependent, and you have to look at what is the survivability or the reality of that device being used a second or a third time, and where, right? That's the other thing is, where are the markets for that secondary use? I mean, so much of Southeast Asia, maybe not so much Latin America, but so much of our devices, you guys all know, a lot of this stuff gets shipped overseas and repurposed and resold into the Asian markets, for example. So is there a path to market for whatever that OEM's widget is that's going to play well? And that will determine, in my opinion, whether they want to make the play into that refurbishment space and actually make the investment behind it. I mean, you have to really pencil everything out to understand when you have a device that's, let's say, worth $100 and you've got $47 of loaded cost to create that finished good. And if the market's only going to bear a $160 price tag, that the math just doesn't tie off anymore. So you got to do a lot of research and all the penciling out to make sure, is there even a viable business here versus are we just doing this, for marketing purposes or to look good? Hopefully that answers your question, Tim, and thanks for the zinger. He got me back.
Anybody else have a question or a comment?
Hello? Oh, so I was wondering if you could comment, when you are an ITAD, you obviously can't do everything, so you have to vet your partners because you're really bidding as the front man for services that are behind you that you may not fulfill, like in the, whether it's your recycling downstream and there's compliance activities that have to be visible to the OEM, because if they select you as a partner, they want to know everything what's going to happen to everything as they go through. So I just wondered if you could talk about that process of finding partnerships to help you fulfill as an ITAD.
Yeah, partnerships is always something I've always looked at very seriously. I think, and I was listening to Zegers earlier talking about finding partners. He was, referring a lot around financial partners that are going to back him and help him get connected. But, in my 20 years of doing this, I built partnerships all the time, right? That is the fastest way and quickest way to scale your business, to generate into new opportunities. And by the way, as you start building different verticals through partnerships, all of a sudden, sometimes it makes sense to consider whether you invest and go buy a company to pull that expertise in-house, or you learn enough about it, you can build it in-house. But knowing the ecosystem of let's call it co-opetition in our world, right? We all kind of compete against each other, but there's times where we need to work together. I think from an OEM perspective, when you want to work with them, the key is always transparency, right? You need to say, listen, here's what I am doing for you. Here is how I'm serving you in these other markets or these other product types or service needs that you guys need. But I have vetted these folks out. I've done my due diligence. I've visited their facilities. I've spent time with them. We've got contracts in place. And you can be fully transparent. I think that in my opinion, the biggest key to winning and leveraging a large partner network to go with an OEM or any client that's global in nature for that matter is building a system where you can tie all that data together in one place. Because you look at, we built a ServiceNow plugin years ago, and ServiceNow plugin is great if you're an end user that's using your ITAD company, right? But if I have 3 other ITADs and they have ServiceNow integrations, now I have to manage every single one of those things, right? So systems becomes that bottleneck. And I've been talking a little bit lately with some of my clients more around like digital transformation and opportunities, right? I think there is a massive opportunity. It kind of goes what John was talking about with around the AI and automation and robotics, is how do you digitally differentiate yourself from the rest of the industry? And I think, software tools, a great client portal, integrations with whether it's an ERP system at an OEM or an IT asset management system at an end user, I think that's the biggest thing. And to your point is the transparency and visibility into that. Everybody has to kind of be feeding into that same pool of information to share with the OEM, and probably on the compliance side, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, as you're putting together a vetting process for your partners, you should be considering the OEM requirements specifically, and then any other things related to data security, where the things are going downstream end of life. Either visiting those facilities, being able to ensure physical security practices are there to be able to protect those devices, and ensuring that wherever they're sending it to after it gets tested or destroyed is ending up there. Yeah, one of our key services that we offer is downstream vendor due diligence. We visit a bunch of facilities who's on probably everybody's downstream map that to ensure that everything's going as planned or meets any specific requirements. If we have an OEM specific requirements, we have a full-on audit that we'll fill out based on their requirements, what we see there. So great question.
Anybody else? Comment, question? The light's really bad here, so just kind of go like this. I just want to make sure I don't miss anybody. Okay, so, and it may be an obvious question, but maybe not. Do you think that an ITAD needs to hire a consultant if they want to move into a different market, if they want to try something different? Because there's something to be said for the school of hard knocks. there's something to be said for people that when there weren't consultants that were just doing it and figuring it out, and this didn't work, and then they just tried something else until it did. Are there any instances where maybe that is a better solution or a better idea, or is it no?
All right, so I've been dying to give this answer. It depends, right? That was always a typical consultant answer, and now I understand why, because it really does depend, right? It's not like, hey, just give me a price for this. There's so much more color to it. I absolutely think there's a ton of value. I think you need to make sure that you get the right consultant who has the right expertise and experience for what you're doing. Like if someone came to me and asked me, hey, I need help with my R2 certification, I'd be like, talk to Tom. I'm not your guy. I know enough to be dangerous. I can tell you who to go to, but that also brings up another point. I consider myself like a 1-degree platform, right? Whatever you need, if you come to me, like I pretty much know someone who does that, or I know someone else who probably knows how to get that answer. So there's something to be said for time to market and velocity, right? So if you want to spin something up, instead of trying to navigate your way there and fumble it, you may pay a little bit of money over here to get with the consultant, maybe more than it even would have if you were to hire someone. But if it takes that person a year to get you there versus a consultant can get you there in a month, that to me makes sense, right? So it's a good question. But the way I look at it this way is if I'm going to go from here to Fort Lauderdale today, right, I can take a car without a GPS and try to navigate my way there, or I can turn on Google Maps and I can be there in a very efficient manner. So it depends on how important it is to you and, the duration of the project and everything else. That's the way I look at it.
For sure. Great. That's a great analogy there. I love it. Yeah, definitely. The value of being able to know what you're doing right away is kind of what we've got to offer for you. You can hire a full-time compliance person. You should probably have someone at least in charge of your legal requirements at minimum, but being a compliance person would take a full-time position where if you bring in a consultant, we could either handle it for you completely or be able to train that person in a little bit quicker than they would by figuring it out by yourselves. Some of the things that we see is reading through standards, being able to meet requirements, and taking that requirement to the extreme. So going above and beyond, and not necessarily still being able to meet the requirements of it, but taking it to a level that hinders your initial process. We see happening a lot within this industry. So the other thing, going back to the downstream stuff, you being able to go and vet every single person, it would take you hours, and sending people to different places, tons of expenses. Well, we have already desk gods in place to be able to share to everybody. So just a quick thing. The other thing that I would mention is we kind of have a pulse on what is happening within the industry, including trends on certification. So during our internal audits, during your certification prep, we're telling you, hey, this is kind of a focus this year. This is kind of a focus that's coming up in the future. For example, some climate change amendments to ISO. You're going to have to determine whether climate change is a relevant issue or not. And you can take that as deep as you want or as shallow as you want within that. But we've got some good insight on what to think there.
Yeah, and something I would add on the consulting side, I think anywhere your business has risk is also where I would focus. Obviously, compliance is a huge one. If you get into whether it's contracts, you're not gonna. I've done enough contracts in my life. I'm pretty close to getting it pretty accurate, but I still run stuff past my business attorney just to make sure I'm not missing out. So I think anything that could put your business at risk or result in fines are super important. I mean, what he does, if you guys look at what's happening in the environmental landscape all around the world in every country with all the different legislation changes, whether it's the Basel stuff or whether it's something that's going on in France or wherever it may be, right? Having a connection into that fabric of what's happening in the world around legislation changes, compliance changes, import-export laws, how you're moving product, what's focus materials, what's non-focus materials. If you guys didn't see the ban and Siri webinar they did last week, which I posted to LinkedIn, that was one of the best hours I've spent of my life learning about what's really happening, because we all hear about it, and some of you may know it very intimately depending on what your role is, but it was super educational to me of what's coming come January when this thing goes into effect. If you haven't paid attention, there's a really big change coming in our industry coming up here, and you're either going to get sunk by it or you're going to ride the wave and take advantage of it and figure out how to use it to your advantage.
Thank you. Okay, so you don't work for free, obviously. I know some people wish you did, but you don't. So how do you measure the ROI when you're hiring a consultant? Because I know anytime when I was with Blanco, when we even were doing an event, we had a measurable ROI on to know, was this a good event for us to do? Or they looked at other investments. What's the ROI going to be? So how do you do that when you're hiring a consultant?
Yeah, so I've done, in my early learning of this new change of being a consultant, I learned some lessons as far as, doing certain things without kind of time stamps as far as when certain things need to get done. People bring you on, they like you, they've known them for a while, okay, great, but you really need to look at a couple areas. I mean, number one, obviously, is, whatever you're doing, is this going to grow revenue, right? So that's obviously an easy ROI. So what is your target? Clients come to us all the time, hey, can you help us go sell our business? No, I'm not here to bring you. I may have clients that come to us who are looking for a solution that I know is a fit for what you do, but if you want us to help you grow sales, let's look at who you're doing now, who you're going after, how's your sales team structured, how are they compensated, all those things. And we help them build the right engine to help them go after whatever market they're going at. And that's a fairly easy one. We're going to invest this many dollars in these salespeople. We're going to do this marketing campaign, whatever else, and then we want to review every 90, 180, and 360 to make sure that, based on what we put together in our scope of work, that we're meeting those targets, right? It could be cost savings, which is a fairly easy one. So you spend a day, you walk through someone's warehouse and say, you can do this different, that different, that different. It's going to save you 10%. You pencil out the math. Okay, listen, it's going to take us 90 days to roll this out, and based on saving 10 cents an asset, we know it's going to equate into these savings. So you can actually go back after, again, do 30, 60, 90-day reviews and go back and measure that stuff. I think the other thing I think a lot of people forget about, so for the business owners in the room, going back to, again, the earlier kickoff about selling your businesses, doing a lot of these things creates enterprise value. So there's money in, whether it's cost savings or additional revenues you bring in today, but outside of that, or because you did these activities, you've now taken your business, let's say it does $5 million a year in EBITDA, but you made these changes, now you're $7 million a year in EBITDA, and you've also added a couple new locations, which becomes more attractive to a private equity investor, for example. So there's a lot of fairly tangible ROI cases, and I would highly recommend, if you work with a consultant, ask for those, because if you don't, you're going to spend a lot of money, like, what the hell did I just get? I've done that a few times, and I'll be honest with you. But I think it's important to measure that out. But you need to be very diligent about it, and if you are going to hire a consultant to spend your time and money, make sure you and your team are going to be on board with it. Show up to the meetings on time. If you're going to work on a project together, make sure your team who is going to be involved with that is readily available to do it, because otherwise everybody's got day jobs, everybody's going a million miles an hour right now, and the last thing the guy in logistics wants to deal with is, hey, I got to come up with this new software system, and it's going to take me, I'm already working 10 hours a day, how am I going to do this? So you wind up throwing money out the window. So you got to make sure a good consultant will work with you to make sure you guys really crystallize what the output is that you're looking for and what the investment is to calculate the ROI.
For sure. I think the name of the game is efficiency in this industry and most industries, as Todd was saying. Being able to have cost savings. You already need to meet these requirements, conform to your certifications. It's just how long you're spending, human power, financial resources. We're able to have the expertise in different areas and seeing how other companies do it to be able to advise you the most efficient way to do that.
Okay, I'm going off in another direction. I'm a bit ADD, and I was thinking I like going in other directions. What kind of changes are you seeing with the ESG requirements now? That's the big buzzword for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. Biggest things is starting to identify in Scope 2 and Scope 3 emissions for these OEMs. Being able, they're not direct emissions, but what their service providers are able to do with them. So one of the standards that we're seeing be more and more used in this industry is ISO 50001, which is energy management, which besides just your emissions to the atmosphere, emissions with traveling, things like that, you're also your energy management, being able to identify your electricity and natural gas usage and report that to the OEMs. That's a big change that we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we already know about the different, sustainability calculators that are going on out there that people are trying to build and reporting wise. I think if you look, going back to the OEM topic, these OEMs, Zegers mentioned earlier in the session around, 20 years ago, there was no head of sustainability back then. Now, every large organization has a head of sustainability. That's a tough one. head of sustainability, but they also have, you know, teams of hundreds of people that are in this world, because to his point, it's not just the e-waste side of it. They're looking at from the front end procurement of all these raw materials through the manufacturing process and out the door, and this is kind of the end of it. So I think you're going to see a lot of development there. You know, in my days at Ingram years ago, we would do a quarterly business review with a client or an annual review, and we would have the little nice slide that says how many elephants were saved and how much gas and water savings, et cetera. And it was always a nice slide to have. They would pass it to their, what they called their green team back then, right? It was just a kind of a group that agreed to get together and try to be environmentalists. But now you see where clients are coming to their ITAD providers saying, hey, this is table stakes now. I need to get this report on a regular basis. So whether it's you sending me this file monthly or quarterly or on your website, I can go in and run queries of reports of what material I sent you from what locations, and it gives me real-time calculations, because maybe they only have to report on the environmental benefits in Africa. And so they don't want to look at all their jobs. They want to narrow it down to what jobs did we do in 2023 in Africa. So I can provide that information back to the sustainability teams in that market. So it's a big growing space. It's going to continue to get more and more complex, I think, which obviously for everybody in this room should present more opportunity, in my opinion.
Wonderful. I want to ask the audience, any thoughts, any experiences you're having with consultants, any questions, or is everybody just so ready for lunch? Yes. We're going to get you 1 second.
Is there a standard calculator that is, it seems like there's a variety of calculators.
Definitely, great question. Calculator for, I assume, emissions, right, or your energy usage. Good question. That's currently in development. I know eStewards and SEER are both working on their own ESG standard, specifically the committee with Siri, and then I know in the panel right after lunch, I'm on a panel with Daniel Puckett. He'll be talking a little bit about that as well. So good question. It's in the works. Nothing at the moment to say, hey, this is how you calculate these things. There is best practices on what you should point to, but you're right that the exact formulas of it, nothing identified yet.
That's a really good question and a huge need we've had a void of in our industry for a long time. You guys probably, if you've been doing it long enough, you remember the ABT Associates calculator. That's from 2013 that we all used for a long time. Now EPA has kind of taken that over. They have the WARM calculator, which is good to see because they actually do iterations and new versions every couple months or whatever it seems like. So I think most people are fairly, for the most part, are using the EPA WARM calculator as far as tracking that. I don't believe it does the calculations on reuse. It's only on recycling, which doesn't really do good because there's a different, impact coming out of stuff that's being reused versus recycled, right? So I think there's a lot to be desired there, which is why I think eStewards and Siri are trying to build this thing. And hopefully it'll be something that comes out that it becomes table stakes and it's behind us and we can all get clean and move on with our lives. But it's been a hot topic for years. It's a great question.
Thank you there's a question over there. Okay. Hold on 1 second. I think there's two. I think there's a lady behind you as well.
Thanks. I appreciate it. And the ESG credits is great and stuff, but it really comes down to money. And so at what point will there be valuation to those credits?
You talking about carbon credits?
Or is there already?
You talking about carbon credits, I assume?
Be able to trade.
Yeah. There's a lot of the carbon credits has been a thorn in my side for about 15 years now when the concept was coming up, right? Because it's super complex to try to understand how all that stuff works. I think it is going that direction, and I think once it gets solved, it's going to be a very big thing because, data is kind of the new currency in our world, right? And I think environmental data is like, it's like maybe the pound versus the U.S. dollar. There's a ratio there. But I think that day is coming. I don't know when, and this goes back to I'm a consultant. I'm not an expert in that space, but I do believe the day is coming where that's going to become a material part of it. So now, if you look at recycling a bunch of devices and maybe there's some commodity value over here, hopefully that will enhance the value of recycling for every one of us in this room, that now there's an additional revenue stream coming in from bringing a product through. I absolutely think that day is going to come.
Yep. Hello, I'm Cassie Gruber. So I work for Jabil. We're a contract manufacturing solutions provider, so a totally different lens. We're like the brand behind the brand for the most part. So regulations is driving so much of this, but so are our customers. So we've got like throughout Europe, CSRD, CS triple D, I mean, on the design side, ESPR, now eco-labeling, EP, EPD, like all of this stuff is just, it's really exploding. Then you have, so the SEC pulled out of Scope 3 now, but there's California. So it's all about Scope 3. I mean, Scope 1 and Scope 2 are important, but it is like for us, Category 1 of Scope 3, which is products and services, represents 87% of our emissions. And we manufacture across like 16 industries and 30 countries, a lot of brands that were like putting their best foot forward, but they're driving this stuff. And there is not one calculator. And there are so many different things to calculate on top of that. So you look at a product, you have the services, so you have your operational emissions, Scope 1 to Scope 2, then you have 15 categories of Scope 3, and then you have all the design stuff. Like, how do you connect the dots? How do you create these circular economies? And how do you take credit for it? And then there's the, the due diligence that we have to do this. So it's like, it is very, very complex, and we're all trying to figure this out, but unfortunately, we're doing it in like silos. And we need to come together, like CEP, so Circular Electronics Partnership, is one association. I'm really hoping that we can make an impact together, because the reason that we joined is because it is a diverse, global, multi-stakeholder across the value chain. So you have recyclers, you have ITAD companies, manufacturers, brands, and we need to pull in like chip makers, all of these different companies that contribute to the value chain that are going to jump on the ship and get tactile and conduct use cases, and then take those lessons learned and then put them to scale with efficiency.
That's a good point. I mean, the ODM, I didn't even really talk about the ODMs, right? The business behind the brands. It's a good point. You guys may have also heard of a term called Scope 4 out there now. So my understanding from what I've read so far is that Scope 4 is actually what we're talking about more on the ITAD report, it's about avoided carbon emissions versus Scope 3. So Google that and really have a few drinks and think about that one a little bit deeper. And when I figure it out, I'll let you know.
Thank you, all of you that hung in there. I'm sure I'll see you on the line for lunch. We're going to be here for the next few days and look forward to meeting those of you that we haven't met yet. Thank you for coming.